I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Today I'm talking to UK filmmaker Mj Dixon. He keeps his budgets low and has experimented with many different types of distribution. We'll get into his movies, how he puts them out, and how he markets them. Let's do the interview thing. And how's it going, man?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. I was just looking at your IMDb, and we've been making movies like roughly the same amount of time. Looks like you started a few years before me, around 99. How did you get started?
Well, I think it's something I'd always wanted to do, really. I mean, in terms of my, like the first decade of my filmmaking, I think was really me just finding my feet a lot of it. But I really started out when I really wanted to make films, but I wasn't really sure how to do that. I think, I mean, I don't know whether you remember or whether it was different in the US, but like back in the kind of in the 90s, like camera equipment just wasn't really an accessible thing. Like only wealthy families had, where I was from, only wealthy families had like camcorders, and like 8mm had completely just phased out. So there was a kind of a bit of a wild west between accessible gear again and, you know, and what was considered accessible a few years ago with kind of film cameras and stuff. So I wasn't really sure where to start, really. I ended up enrolling at the local media college. It was like a course, and you did you studied how the news manipulates audiences, and you know, and there was a lot of film theory and stuff in there, genre study. But once a week, we were allowed to take these big cameras out, you know, like old TV station cameras that took the VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And we were allowed those for like an hour a week. So I'd spend the entire week not listening to any of these other lessons and just drawing storyboards and writing scripts of stuff that I was going to make with these cameras. You know, eventually I made a short film called Once Bitten. So good, we made it twice. I think we shot about 75% of it with like with two actors. But obviously, I must have been about 16 or 17 at the time. Obviously, it was just a very unpolished production, I think. And so 75% of the way through, they kind of decided acting wasn't for them. And it came down to, I went from being the cameraman and director to being director whilst being in front of the camera, starring in this awful horror short thing. And the producer ended up playing my girlfriend in it because her friend, who was originally... Anyway, so it wasn't very good, but it was my first kind of real proper foray into making movies. And I guess from there, I just thought, okay, that was bad, but like, you know, how can I do better next time? And I guess that was just kind of the start of that for me, really.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I hear other filmmakers tell, you know, very similar stories. You know, started out in shorts, you know, made them. First one's not so good. You know, they got, you know, you learn your craft over time, and, you know, learning it through the method of doing all these short films. Where, you know, me, I see, like I started in 2003, right after the Panasonic came out, the DVX 100, the 24p mini DV camera, and I was just like, well, I'll just shoot a feature. So, you know, and then put the features out. But, you know, I'm basically, you know, doing that same learning curve, but I'm doing it on features that are like way out there in the public and distributed. So, you know, all of my, you know, colossal, you know, early failures are, you know, they're up there, you know, for good.
Yeah. Well, I think when I started out, so initially I didn't even consider short films to be a thing. So I'd written this big sprawling post-apocalyptic epic that was like a mash of like monsters and like sci-fi. It was called Demonic Steel. I remember it well, and it
good title.
And I really tried to get this project off the ground, but it was only when I went to college to film this media college that they said, oh well, you can only make a 5-minute short film for class. Right. And so I think that kind of became that ended up by proxy becoming the first thing that I made. But it took me another 9-10 years to get a feature off the ground. And I mean, it wasn't the first one that I tried, you know. My IMDb is littered with attempts that ended up becoming short films or,
Mm.
and things like that.
So what was your first feature then?
So officially, it's a film called Slasher House, which eventually we shot it in 2010, but it came out. It came out at the very beginning of 2013,
Okay.
but it premiered in 2012. But it was just for me personally, it was a huge project. So it took me so long to get it from actually in front of the camera to through post-production and out the other side. We had made one previously called Creepsville in 2009. It was like a no budget, like a literally no budget, shot on SD mini DV tapes, and it had like 34 locations, and
wow.
I mean, what was I thinking? So it was supposed to be like a 14-day shoot, and I think it took 5 months in the end. But I made a huge mistake, I think, then of again, I didn't really know what I was doing to a large degree, which I mean, not that I do now, but to a much less degree back then. I was under the impression I needed to have like someone on camera and then someone assisting the camera and then someone on lighting. At one point, I was like, I need someone to be running lighting and the portable lighting system that we have. I need someone on jib. I need someone doing sound. I need someone, wire wrangling. We had on our post-production team, we had like like an editor, then like someone else doing the Foley, and then someone else doing the score. And for a film with no budget, that was my first feature. We must have had a crew of like 25, 30 people.
Wow.
And it was too much. And because I let go of so much control of various areas, it kind of fell into that kind of post-production hell where no one was ever quite finishing their job, or it was coming in late. And so it just kind of became a bit of a mess in this time, because post-production was completely out of my hands. I kind of had this script that was like 5 actors set in one location called Slasher House. And I was like, well, while I'm waiting for this to go through post-production, I'll go and make that. And I did.
Were you funding these all like out of pocket?
Well, I mean, so I've always been a little bit obsessed with the idea of like the true no budget film. The first feature that we tried to put together was like exactly that. Like, so the whole idea was we're kind of not allowed to spend money on anything. And so that was kind of a really interesting challenge, because like all of the crew were made up of people we'd met over the course of like university and stuff, who were just looking for a credit for IMDB. And so, and then the actors were the same. They were just looking for show reel material. And so it was just a case of, well, look, let's put something together that kind of tries to do that for everybody. That particular film, I think I worked it out that it cost about £1.64 or something. Technically, I mean, bear in mind that there's always going to be some kind of outlaid cost. But with Slasher House, I wrote it as a kind of with the idea of selling it initially, I think, because back when I was in about 2005, I was really interested in writing spec scripts, and so I wrote this script that could kind of conceivably be a linchpin in like a shared universe thing.
Oh, cool.
Well, after I hadn't sold it, I thought, right, well, we can, like, I always thought it'd be like one of those very low budgeters. We'll raise like £1 million, £1 million to make this film. And so we tried, and we couldn't. And I said, well, can we raise £500,000? No. Can we raise like 50 grand? No. And then it got to the beginning of 2010, and I said, well, what can we get hold of? And I had a producer on the project at the time. And he said, well, I've got someone willing to put, £3 grand in. I've got £1,000. And I said, right, well, I have £1,000 on my, you probably don't have Argos where you are, but it's like a catalog shop where you can buy anything from it. So I had like £1,000 on an Argus card, and I was just like, right, so okay, so if I buy, literally, rather than renting camera equipment, I will buy. They were really new at the time, but a 550D DSLR and a 50mm lens. That gives me basically the equipment I need to shoot a feature that's going to look half decent,
Right.
And so that's kind of what it became. Really, is this kind of. I mean, what's weird is in the end we had about $4,000 outside of equipment to spend,
Mhm.
and we ended up shooting in another country,
Oh, wow.
which was just nuts. Like, I mean, I guess not many people are aware, even in the UK, but there's a kind of little separate country outside of ours called the Isle of Man, and it's just like a little island, just kind of off the coast. There's a lot of argument about whether it's part of the UK or whether it isn't. They claim currently, especially with Brexit and everything, they definitely claim that they aren't. A friend of ours was from there, and so he said, "Oh, you know, I might be able to get us access to this old prison building that they condemned a few years ago." And we said, "Okay." So it was like they said, "Well, we can loan it to you for about $7,000 a week." And we said, like, we don't have that. So he went, let me have a talk. And he was still a student at the time. I think he was studying motorsports engineering. But he kind of he used the student card, and they said, okay, well, you know, how does £500 a week sound for this place? But you've got to pay all the electric and everything. And we were like, okay. But then it meant we had to strip down our entire crew to like about 5 people. And then it became, who on the crew can also be part of the cast, because that saves on money. I was doing a podcast literally with one of the actors who was in that first film the other day, and I've completely forgotten that to get there, it would have cost us $2,000 to take a commercial vehicle. Instead, we got this van, loaded it up with film gear, and then registered ourselves as a camper van. Mm-hmm. And then we had to concoct this entire story in case anyone questioned us, that we were like old friends from university, and we're going out there to have a camp out, you know, and make a little kind of documentary about it and all that, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was foolish, really, because the Isle of Man has about 30 people on it. It doesn't really. Anyone who is, that'll kill me. But it has a very small population, so everybody knew we were coming because everyone talks to everybody there. But yeah, so to save money, we had to register ourselves as like this little camper van and stuff. And I mean, the fact that we had such a little budget, but thought it was a good idea to drag everyone like onto a ferry across the ocean to this little island was just madness. But you know, you don't. I think when you're starting out, you don't really consider that that's a really silly thing to do.
With the first one anyway. Did you end up doing distribution with that, or did you self-distribute, or did you get it out there?
I don't know why. There was a girl in it called Eleanor James, who was quite a famous model at the time. So she'd approached me early on when I was writing the script, and said, can I have a look at it when it's finished? And I used to be very, very cautious about that. But because she was kind of a name and she'd been in quite a lot of British horror stuff, I thought, well, it can't hurt. So I sent it over to her, and she basically said, I'll do it. I can see you're on a small budget, so I'll pay for my own flights and stuff and things like that. So that was a real help to us. So while we were even shooting, people were asking to report on the film and things like that. So that really helped. And then we signed it with we signed UK distribution within like about a month of the project being locked. I think we premiered it for the cast and crew. We'd booked the festival premiere at a place called Horror on Sea. It was like at the time a brand new festival.
Yeah, I know that one.
Oh yes, of course. Well, Death Day showed there last year.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah. Well, we've been going there every year since. Hopefully I'll get to talk about that a little bit more later on. But so it was their first year, and we'd sent it to all the kind of big ones in the UK, like Fright Fest and stuff like that. And we just hadn't heard anything back. I mean, bearing in mind, it was a film that was made on $5,000, you know. Mm-hmm. So we didn't expect a kind of warm reception to it, really, I don't think. But Horror on Sea put it on at a primetime slot on the Saturday night after their big film, which was Inbred by Alex Shandon, which was like a big deal at the time. So it was kind of a weird experience, my first festival experience, being kind of with a director that I'd grown up watching their films and stuff, and then suddenly we were stood on the same stage as him and people taking photos of us together. It was very weird. We got some offers, but none of them were very good. But we'd come to expect that at the time. I think in 2013, like the kind of standard had become, you won't get offered an MG. And the thinking of making it on $5,000 is a couple of years before that was that I'd heard through the grapevine that the kind of the highest you were going to get in terms of an MG was about 10. So I thought, right, okay, well, if we aim to shoot it for half that, then at least we'll make a profit when we get that. So we got offered like it wasn't really an MG, it was like a really, really low ball like advance. We said no, like we can't do that because obviously no one's getting paid back from that. You know, we didn't want to sell the film short really, and we thought we here, like you know, because that was our best offer. We'd had a lot of kind of offers that were like, we'll take it, but we won't give you anything, you know, like that kind of thing. And because we'd never dealt with anything like that before. At the time, my girlfriend, now wife, we'd only just kind of met. And she was with almost no experience taking care of this whole kind of distribution thing, because she works in law, so she was looking over contracts, and we were trying to figure all that stuff out. Oh yeah, my God, saved my life, like, you know, countless times in the last 10 years. So anyway, we got an email back from these guys, and they said, well, look, how about this? We'll split everything with you 50-50. And I was like, okay, like we really believe in the film, you know, we'll do a 50-50 split with you on everything. And I, at the time, because they'd been so friendly, thought, yeah, okay, like, you know, we've built a friendship while we've been discussing this contract. So I thought, okay, we'll do that. I mean, the second we signed the contract, they almost completely disappeared. Like, you know, like, I found out the film was coming out in like May. So this was in January. I found out in March that the film was coming out in May via their website, just by a chance search on their website. I said, oh, there's our film coming out. Excellent.
Nice to know.
And then we started then we started fighting to get sales reports. It was evident that we were selling a lot of copies, but then there was like weird charges, like $5,000 for DVD authoring, 10 grand for artwork services. I mean,
wow, 10 grand on artwork. That must have been some killer artwork.
Well, what was really funny is, so one of the rival bids we'd had, they were a small distributor. They couldn't afford to offer us an upfront fee, but they were they did the authoring and artwork services for this company, and they said, we've never charged anywhere close to that.
Yeah,
you know, but at that point, what can you do?
Yeah, that's like studio level charges. No, I hear very similar stories all the time. My first movie was very similar. You know, I gave it to them, or you know, negotiated with them. They were, you know, super kind. You know, delivered everything, and then just crickets. I think I got one sales report from them ever in 5 years. You know, and never made a dime.
Here's an interesting thing that we did. Well, so they did this whole, well, it's not making any money, sorry, was kind of the tack they kept coming back with. So we just went in with, it was a little bit of a stroke of genius, to be honest, from my wife, is we just went back and said, it's not, so you're not selling any? And they said, no, it's made all the money it's going to make. There's no further money to be had from this film or anything. And we said, oh, cool. Well, if it's not worth anything to you, can we have the rights back? And they were stuck. So they kind of just went, yeah, I guess so. Like, so 2 years into our 7-year contract, we got our DVD rights back. So, I mean, you can probably see them. I've got piles of them on the shelf back here. So we just started doing our own run of discs through our own website. I think, you know, we covered the cost of that within the space of a year. Like,
yeah.
You know,
over the years, have you done a lot of like self-distribution with?
Oh yeah. So with our next film, we were really, 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 really cautious about it. We'd started talking to this smaller distribution company that we'd had a conversation with the first time, but they'd gone from being a 2-man team to a 1-man team in this period, and then there started to be like a lot of inconsistencies with the offer they were making, because they'd offered us like quite a decent split the first time round, which was like a 70-30 split with no expenses. So we were like, okay, that's cool. So we kind of went back, and then we got like a really low ball offer. We'll give you 20%, you know. And we said, oh, hang on, what about the offer we got last time? you know, we've never made an offer like that. So we dug out the email and said, well, there it is. And they were like, so it got very awkward very quickly. There was a
Right.
lot of kind of like, and then a friend of ours had a film coming out through them. And on the day of release, nothing, just pure silence. I went down to HMV, which is kind of like our big DVD retailer in the UK.
Okay.
On the morning of, as I try to do whenever anyone's got a independent film coming out, I try and get in there first thing on Monday morning so that the shop knows to order more copies of it. I walked down first thing, went in, and just not a sign of it. So I walked back home, and there was a statement from the director saying he'd just been informed that the film wouldn't be getting released through this distributor, but he'll keep everyone posted about future. And then these guys just disappeared off the face of the earth. Like,
wow.
They had another film by another friend of mine that they were due to release as well, that had been waiting 7 years to be released.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they'd really struggled. I mean, again, a lot of us struggled with that kind of SD to HD crossover, I think.
Yeah.
There was a lot of us who shot SD feature films, and then suddenly every distributor wanted a HD master. And there was and that happened within the space of like a year. When that happened, I kind of said to Anna, like, these guys are all the same, man. You know, like, what are they doing that we can't do? You know what I mean? So so I looked at it, and basically the reality was that they would put it on Amazon as a DVD, and they'd ship it to HMV, and they'd potentially get it on supermarket shelves, but then that would cost you, the filmmaker, a price to have it put up there. So we did that. Unfortunately, there's a cost we have here that I don't think you have in the US. Well, which is we have the BBFC. So you have to pay to have a film rated if you want to sell it here.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
And it costs, I think it's about £6 a minute.
Okay.
So if you want to do a run of 100 DVDs, you've first got to pay £1,000-odd to the BBFC.
Wow.
To rate your film. And there's no leeway on that at all. If you want to sell it commercially, you have to have that. So, I mean, for a film that we'd made on, I think, about £6,000, then suddenly we're ploughing another £1,000 into that for BBFC, and then another £500 for a first run of DVDs. You know, and very quickly that cost seems to add up. So we decided, like, you know, let's do it. I mean, we didn't make a huge amount of money, but we definitely made more than we ever would have made given it to a distributor. It took a long time. Well, not a long time, but I think it took about half a year to shift our first run of DVDs. And then the problem was that we'd have to spend money bringing back, buy more, you know.
Right.
So that became a little bit difficult. So we switched to a kind of a print on demand model, but not the Amazon one.
Right.
Where it cost us a lot more to produce the discs, but
nothing
we weren't paying overheads. So that became our model for the next two films. We went to we started kind of, on average, I would say, making a feature per year. And we formed our own little self-distribution label called Red Fuse Releasing. And we just started putting these films out through that. And business was really good. Then Amazon came along, and I think about 2016, 2017, where we discovered that they were allowing us to put our own titles on there.
Oh, for streaming.
Yeah. Because initially we were going through. Do you remember VHX?
No, I used CreateSpace, but I would assume it's something like that.
Well, it was like a streaming website where you uploaded your files, and it would create like a window for you. Well, it's now become Vimeo on demand. Because they bought it and absorbed it. But we were using VHX for a while, and it was really cool because you could customize your window and things like that. And people would go on it, and you could buy the film, and it would download to your browser instantly, and you'd have an HD copy of the films. You could put special features and stuff on there, and it was absolutely fantastic. So we were using that combined with doing the physical stuff as well, and it was. I mean, we weren't earning a lot of money, but
Right.
we were starting to make the money back that we'd spent on making these films. Yeah, with Amazon, I mean, again, we weren't earning, huge amounts of cash, but we were earning enough where we thought, okay, this is becoming viable.
Yeah.
And so we started kind of developing our projects based on that model.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I pretty much did the same thing between 2015 and 2017 or 18. Yeah, it was good times until they started cutting the rates.
The golden years, we'll call it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a really short window now looking back. But,
oh my God, yeah. Like I thought we had at least a good 5 or 6 years in us of. But I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Netflix, I think, though, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, similar. It's the only difference is Amazon it was open so wide open. Where Netflix, you still that there was still curation there. It was still not super easy to get on, just much easier than it is now. But yeah, I'll never forget. I was telling somebody the other day after those first rate cuts, a movie that I put out this year that, was streaming like 2 million minutes a week, I would have made like between 15 and 20 grand a month off of just Amazon back in 2016. But today it's $1,000.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, in the problem we had early on, they were paying a much lower rate in the UK than they were in the US, which was very, very frustrating.
I didn't even realize that.
But for a month, we had 4 titles in the top 30, 2 of them in the top 10 in the horror section, and we'd get a check for like 500 quid at the end of it. Right. And I'm thinking, this is not a very. I mean, when was this? 2017. Yeah, we just got married. 2017, I think.
Yeah.
We decided to put all our legacy titles up there. We had friends who a year before had been making $3,000 a month, and then Amazon was going, "Oh, you're doing really well. Here's a bonus." And we were like, "What?" And they were like, "Oh, well, we just got paid $6,000 off Amazon." And they've, and we've got they gave us a bonus check, so we've got $6,000 to go and make a movie now. And I was like,
yeah.
So it was. But it was a golden era, I think.
Yeah, we were, and I'm not saying the physical media has died, because it hasn't. You can still make money on physical media, but it hadn't taken that really sharp decline yet. So like overall, I think it was like 2017, like we just weren't making the same amount, at least here in the US, we weren't making the same amounts of money on physical, and streaming had kind of come up, but it was like this little weird bubble, it lasted about 2 years. And then, once streaming started falling off, and then, and physical just continues to decline, it gets harder and harder for independent filmmakers to make a go of it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know what's going on with Amazon, but there was some weird stuff would happen. So we'd be flying up to thousands and thousands of minutes streamed a day. It would and then within the space of a day, it would just drop to like 200. And I have just no idea why stuff like that would happen. You'd be soaring, and then just suddenly one day it'd be a straight line down on your analytics.
And
I think that's when I knew that it wasn't a fair game. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I mean, I learned about it not being fair kind of the opposite way. Like it worked out for me a little bit on a couple of titles, but I knew it wasn't right. So basically when I first started uploading to Amazon, I was getting titles that I had licensed to distributors. It was about 8 years into my career, so these titles were starting to free back up from the original license. And I was like, what am I going to do with them? And somebody told me about CreateSpace, so I started putting movies up through CreateSpace. This was before Prime Video Direct was a thing, but you could get streaming up through CreateSpace. So anyway, I put 2 of my older titles up. Both were shot on mini DV SD titles. I did not expect anything, and I put them up, and they were earning $5-10 a month. And then, like out of nowhere, like nowhere, no promotion, no nothing. One of them jumped up to like $1,200 a month and stayed there for a few months. And, you know, I was like, oh, you know, yippee for me. But in the back of my head, I kept thinking that like it wasn't really earned. You know, like I didn't do the promotion for it. I didn't build the audience. Just something triggered in their algorithm and boom, people started seeing it, you know?
Yeah.
And that can happen and more often than not, it does happen the opposite way, where, you know, just you put something up, it's doing well, and then just something algorithmically happens that they don't like, and boom, title's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had so we released a sequel. Well, we didn't. A distributor released a sequel to one of our previous films on Amazon, and you know when it suggests films underneath,
Yeah.
So you'd expect the original to be underneath there, but nowhere to be seen. Like, and it's weird things like that that tells me that. But that happened very suddenly, because it used to be if you went on one of our films on Amazon Prime, underneath you'd see like another 4 or 5 of our films underneath there, you know. And so that made a lot of sense. But then suddenly, out of the blue, like they started disconnecting all these things. I have no idea why.
So how have you dealt with this? Like what's your method now to release?
Well, so I kind of went like the opposite way, I guess, to you. Is that so? Like I say, we just finished a film called Mask of Thorn, which was like a prequel to another to our second film that we'd made. And it had been made on like a couple of grand, you know, and it's like an 80s schlocky slasher movie. And I thought, well, you know what? We'll a lot of the cast had come on board because they'd seen the original on Prime and then applied for our projects as fans of that film. So that was that was the first time I'd ever experienced people coming onto set and going, I'm a fan of that character, and now I get to be in one of the films. And I thought, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So then a lot of people were like, well, we said, well, look, like we can get our films onto Prime. So a lot of people kind of just came on going, cool. So we'll be in a film that's going to be on Amazon Prime. We raised a couple of grand and went and shot this movie like with local actors who were just really interested in being involved in something that was like going somewhere in terms of it would be on a service that people recognized. And so we made that with the idea of just dropping that onto Prime. And so we did like a limited DVD release, and that went like okay. But again, physical was starting to drop off at that time. So this was, when was this? Towards the end of 2017, I think. Physical was really starting to kind of slope off. So we shot the film in 2017. We premiered in 2018. The problem I always have is that Horror on Sea is right at the beginning of the year. So you make a film in 2020, but it premieres in 2021, and that's
gotcha.
And then just after Horror on Sea in about February on Amazon Prime, that was kind of the release schedule we'd come up with to give DVDs enough time to sell, and then anyone who hadn't paid for it could then watch it for free on Amazon Prime. And so we kind of had a similar structure to, you know, theater to disc to
a little windowing.
Yeah, so that made sense to us. So in the meantime, whilst we'd been prepping the release of Mask of Thorn, I went and shot 2 other movies. I mean, we'd had kind of plans for them, but what we did is we looked at what else was coming out. And that year we had Child's Play on the way. Sorry, the next year we had Child's Play on the way and It Chapter 2. So I said, right, well, look, let's look through our back catalogue. And so we had a character from one of our previous films who's like a killer clown. So I said, okay, well, let's go and make a sequel to that. And I said, we've got a girl who controls dolls with her mind. Right, excellent. So there's Annabelle and Child's Play coming out like a month between each other. Perfect.
That's smart.
So we adapted to that thing. And our idea was we crowdfund the movie. So people basically just pre-order the DVD. We use that money as the budget to make it. We release the DVD ourselves, and then we put it on Prime in those exact windows where those films are coming out. and that's going to be great, right? Like, so that was like a solid plan that we had. So, well, the first one we just funded ourselves with a credit card, and then we crowdfunded it kind of after the fact, if you know what I mean, to cover the price of getting the discs printed and things like that. But the other one we crowdfunded up front, and I think we raised about $3,000. So we went and made this killer clown road movie set in America. On like no money.
Right. And you shot it in the UK though, right?
Oh yeah. I've still got
That's funny.
We had this one. We had one license plate.
That's great.
Like the gaffer tape is still on the back of it. That we basically just running around and sticking on any car in the background to try and disguise the fact that we. But we found some really good locations because at the first film was also set in the USA.
Okay.
And we really struggled to find. So what happened was we ended up really creating like pocket locations where it was very hard to tell where they were at all in the world, which was fine for the story, but it meant that we weren't really able to tell anything quite grand. So you'd think with a sequel that I'd go, oh, well, let's make it, let's make life easier for ourselves and we'll relocate this clown to the UK.
Right.
But I just thought, no, fuck it, we'll double down. And I thought, we'll make it a road movie as well because they're really bloody hard to make on no money. And so we did, but I'm a little bit obsessed with challenging myself into creating something bigger than the sum of its parts, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, totally.
We produced these two films with the idea of landing them when these kind of Hollywood movies came out to kind of bank on that success. But then a company in the UK called 101 Films.
Oh yeah, I know them.
Yeah, well, they clocked us or what we were doing and said, "Oh, can we have a look?" And so I said, "Okay." So we were about literally the day before I was starting making the prep, all the artwork and everything to put Mask of Thorn up on Prime. And they said, "Can you come and meet us in London?" And they took us to this nice big fancy hotel where, I mean, me and my wife look like the Addams family. So we turned up at this place, looking like Gomez and Morticia Addams, with all these suave businessmen having their business lunches. And we went and sat down with these guys and they basically said, "Tell us what you're doing." And so I just sat and told them about this shared universe that we've been building, and this is film 8. And they were like, "Oh, right. Like, okay." So they were interested in cleavers. So they said we'd already kind of pre-signed an agreement on that film because they wanted to release it to coincide with It Chapter 2.
Okay.
We went and showed them this catalogue of the shared universe. And they basically said, "What have you not already put on Prime? These ones?" And they said, "Right, we'll take them." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "We haven't made one of them yet." And they said, "We don't care. We'll take it. Go make it. We'll put it out." And that was Pandemonium. So based on this pitch of the shared universe, I mean, obviously we'd sent them a lot of this back catalogue of stuff. So it wasn't just they looked and went, "Yeah, whatever." They liked what we were doing. And so they kind of just said, "Yeah, well, whatever basically you haven't already released yourself, we'll release it." So Mask of Thorn got a release by the skin of its teeth, which was really nice. And so they basically paid us an upfront fee to off for each film. I went from being a penniless filmmaker who'd never made a penny off any of his films really in any meaningful way to signing a contract for 4 films overnight. It felt like I'd made it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was an amazing experience. I mean, they've done a really good job of putting them out. I mean, I won't say it's been how do I say this diplomatically? I won't say it's been a perfect journey,
right?
Because distributors will be distributors, if you know what I mean. But it's I've thoroughly, it's for us. Suddenly, I went from working every day, making adverts, figuring out promotional tools, creating ads, designing ways to get people's attention, to get their eyes on these films, to tell them that they exist, to sharing trailers in groups everywhere. All of a sudden we'll do all that for you. So we made we made probably as much money as we could have made ourselves by working around the clock, just like that on the films. And then the big thing for me was I'd never been able to retrospective. Well, there'd been very few times we'd signed a deal with Slasher House for for someone to use pieces of it in a TV show. So we'd managed to pay some people some back end from that. But suddenly I had 4 films and some money that I could share between the cast and crew and everyone.
Oh, that's great.
Retrospectively, because everyone does it on what I call like faith casting. So we don't have any contracts or anything. People just come and they do it. They sign a release. Obviously, I'm not crazy, but I don't have a contract where they say you will get this if the film sells. I just basically say my plan is to try and get this as far as it'll go. It might happen, and we might make some money. And if we do, you'll get a share of that. And if not, like, we all had a good time. And if that's not for you, then like now's the time for you to know that, which is, and that's how we've done things for like a decade, is just be very upfront with people, because I think that a lot of the time people get other things out of being involved in filmmaking, especially actors. I think my big thing has always been write roles that are interesting for actors to play.
Yep.
And as long as you do that, you will never have a shortage of good actors, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. What roles do the film festivals play in this? Like, you talked a little bit about Horror in the Sea.
Well, I mean, up until recently, not loads, because one of the big problems with, I don't know where you'll find this, because you produce a lot of stuff, is that producing stuff means that you have very little time to deal with the film festival stuff. But what had happened with Horror on Sea is, obviously, they picked nobody else wanted Slash House when we first made it, as at a festival, but Horror on Sea chose it personally, and they made us feel very, very welcome, and we had an absolute blast. And so every year from then on, we sent them a film, and they go, "Of course, you will put your film on," And so it started off, we'd get the late night slot or the early afternoon slot, but then over time, we started getting better and better slots of our movies as our films got better. The slots got better until we were then, I think for 3 years in a row, the Saturday night coveted 8:00 spot, and I was like, but because they were good to us, we remembered that, and so we gave them our premiere every year. Even when a few years later, one of the bigger festivals, we bumped into someone at a screening in London who said, "We should put your." He was the guy who runs the festival, and he said, "You should put you should send your films over our way for their premiere." And we said, it goes to Horror on Sea. That's how it works. And I think because it is it's going on like a family retreat every year now, and it's been really, really an amazing experience. But I think outside of that, we've done very little. Not none, but very few festivals. We've done a few, the odd one. What I'm desperately trying to find is our American equivalent of Horror on Sea, so we can have a US premiere every year. But I've never found a consistent one. We had Dead and Decatur. It's one of those ones where I'm never quite sure when it's on, and then I miss the deadline sometimes. So I've never been quite consistent with that. But over the years we did the odd festival with our feature stuff. But more recently, with everything that's been going on, because we couldn't go out and shoot another feature, I'd made a short in August that I usually release the Halloween after. But I thought, right, well, hang on, this is the last bullet I have in my gun, essentially, until things calm down. Right. So I was like, okay, let's throw that to some festivals. So that's done gangbusters in the last year.
That's good.
And that accounts for probably a quarter of the laurels that I've got. It's a decent amount. A couple of us, we got nominated for the British Independent Cinematography Awards for our latest feature last year, which was a shock, I'll say, because I didn't really start off as a cinematographer. I just kind of did it out of pure necessity. It was either me tell somebody what I wanted or me think it and do it.
Yep.
And so that made more sense. And so it was weird to 10 years later be nominated for an award for my cinematography. So that was quite nice.
That is cool. So I asked this for almost everybody. This will be my last question. If I were to show up, on your doorstep with 50,000 pounds to shoot, and you can do multiple projects if you want, how would you use that? And what kind of movies would you make, and how would you spread that budget out?
Well, I've probably got two answers for you, really.
Yeah.
So there is.
Well, let's pretend COVID's not happening.
Yeah, of course. Always. That's my life. Every morning I wake up. Please don't be happening. I'll just pretend it's all fine.
Wish it away.
A few years ago, we got offered 50 grand to make a feature, but it had like a lot of stipulations that came with it, and so there's been a lot of and ahhing over the years about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a Christmas horror movie. I call it the Christmas Phantasm because it's a very similar idea, but Christmassy. Sometimes I call it Santasm, but it's called Blood on Santa's Claus, and it's like a big for me, sprawling kind of Christmas creature feature with Santa and like demonic elf puppets and killer reindeers and Frosty the Snowman, but he's a giant animatronic monster, And so I've been, it's one of my favorite scripts I've ever written, and I've been desperate. It's one of those ones where, because we do go out and make big rubbery monster movies for less than $5 grand most of the time.
Yep.
But it's one of those films where I could do it like that, but I know that it won't get the respect it deserves, if you know what I mean. And so I've never allowed myself to do it for less than it's worth, if that makes any sense. So
totally,
it would either be that, or I'd probably just make my next rung of shared universe movies like for 10 grand a pop, and that would be like double the budget of everyone we've done so far. So right. Good times all around.
Yeah. I do have one more question. So when you're making movies like this cheap, which I do all the time, so no judgment on my part. But like how do you reconcile like the fan base that says, or not fan base, but whatever, trolls or whatever, said this is a piece of crap, it shouldn't have been made, people shouldn't make movies at this level?
Well, I think it's a case of, because I deal with it, like, I'm not even kidding, every single god day. Like, there's like, I'm like almost every single day there's a new review that tells me that it's the worst film they've ever seen, or but because there's a kind of disconnect between how people understand the world of filmmaking and the reality of it. Like, people hate the original Halloween, and they think it's the worst film they've ever seen. Like, people just hate stuff, I think one of the bigger problems is things like IMDB given like user reviews, and it just doesn't help anybody, because the second you give everyone a voice, all they do is use it for aggression. That's the reality of it. To be honest, it used to get to me quite a lot in the early days, but we had once we signed these 4 films, they came out within the space of like a year. So suddenly, actually, this will really help. So suddenly, like, I'd have a film out and I wouldn't have a chance to breathe from the vitriol I'd get on like my YouTube and like on IMDb and on Amazon and to my emails. I wouldn't have time to breathe before the next one happened.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I was dealing with it every day. I was obsessed with IMDb, and like I was like every day I was like, like 73 people have give this 1 star. Like,
yep.
My God, and it's only been out for 24 hours. Like, what is happening? And so then a weird thing happened with the last release we got. iTunes accidentally released The Haunting of Molly Bannister, which was a title change, which I'd still get a lot of for, but that's another story. Right. They released it by accident 3 weeks before it came out, because they'd just put the date down as 1st of June as a kind of holder title. And then every other marketplace in the UK had changed it to its correct date 3 weeks later, but they hadn't. So
Okay.
they accidentally released it on the 1st of June. I woke up on the morning of 1st of June at about 4 o'clock in the morning to find literally hundreds of comments telling me worst film they've ever seen,
Mm.
and then the film's been out for 4 hours. And I'm thinking, how can this many people have been sat up waiting to watch my film? And so what I did is I looked at where all the traffic was coming from. I'm drawing diagrams down here.
That's great.
I looked at I looked at my YouTube to see where all these comments were coming from.
Uh-huh.
Because also the traffic hit the same time on IMDb, all these negative reviews and 1 stars. And I looked at all these comments, and I
Mhm.
looked at the traffic of where the link they were clicking on to get to these places was,
Mhm.
and it was a fucking pirate website. And I
Mm.
was like, so hang on, every day when a film comes out and I get all these negative reviews like day one, and I think I'm the worst filmmaker in the world, like, because it's been released to the public and the public have spoken and they
Right.
say you're a terrible filmmaker. The reality is that every single comment, every single negative comment was coming from a pirate website from someone who'd stolen my movie. And so I thought, I don't care what thieves think of me.
Right.
Like, and
Totally.
suddenly, just like that, my skin became about 10 centimeters thicker. Like, just in that one moment, I went,
Right.
oh, they're all dickheads. I don't care what dickheads think. Like, and it was just purely by that accident that I realized the correlation between the two things. So if you've got a film comes out and on day one you get all this, it's because it's gone up onto a pirate website. People
Mhm.
have stolen it and then gone, it's not worth anything because they don't think anything's worth anything. Boom, there you go. You've won.
Yeah, that's a good story. I like that. I'm gonna share that.
Please do.
Yeah, I like it, man. So if people want to find out more about you and the stuff you're doing, where can they look? Where can they find you?
If you go to myco.co.uk, that's mycho.co.uk, we have everything there. We've got, I can read you a list because I have it in front of me. So we've got, you can buy all our DVDs there. You can get links to our Prime stuff if you want to download digital versions with special features. All that's there as well. We've got short films there. We've got access. We have a Patreon that we produce. Well, until the pandemic landed, we're producing about 4 or 5 films a year.
Hmm.
But currently we do a bunch of like shows to basically to tide everyone over until it gets operational again. So we have my wife and UK Scream Queen Eve Oliver run one called Real Horror, where they kind of talk about real horror stories and
Oh, cool.
try and pitch them as indie movies. We do a thing called Gritty Reboots, where we take like a franchise and stuff and turn that into like a gritty Chris Nolan style reboot of like an old franchise. And we've done like Highlander and
Hmm.
Biker Mice from Mars. I think we did a Thundercats one.
Nice.
Our next one is Ghostbusters, so he's looking forward to that. We do
Yeah.
comic books and stuff as well. We
Oh, wow.
do every year we do a limited edition VHS release of one of our films.
Hmm.
So we're about to do Holloway. You might be able to see them in the background there. We've got some
Yeah.
VHS releases of our stuff. So yeah, we're about to do one of our films starring Hellraiser's Nicholas Vince called Holloway. That came out in 2015. We're going to do a gold edition VHS of that.
Oh, that's
We do
neat.
T-shirts and stuff with merch as well. I don't just take an image and print it on a T-shirt,
Right.
like from one of our films. Like, so all of our T-shirts, I hand draw them and hand color them,
Oh, wow.
and we do like really super limited runs so that they're not everywhere. You can get them for like a very short period of time, and then they're gone. And man, I've got, because I'm tethered with this blue wire,
Yeah.
I can't reach
That's fine.
anything. But I do. Yeah, we've got all these.
Oh, that's
and I,
nice. That's
and
beautiful.
I hand draw one. We do like I think maybe 2 every year, and then we have like the Myco logo ones and stuff as well. But these are the
Wow, those are great.
well, thank you.
I might have to order something. Those are nice.
Well, we do permanent monochrome versions of them, but the coloured ones now are only ever
Yeah, limited
like
edition.
limited edition things.
Yeah, that's great.
And then and we spent the last 3 years. They were supposed to come out last year, but then obviously everything went mad. Developing action figures of our characters.
Yeah,
and like that's like been like a dream of mine since I was a kid. So I've got oh, there we go. I actually have here a prototype. He's a little bit smaller than the final product, but a kind of base prototype of our Cleaver action figure that's that'll be coming out. And I think we're going to do, again, very similar to the way we do, or we used to do our DVDs, is just do very limited runs, but make them a bit special, you know, so they'll have each one will come with like a mini comic book, like the old Masters of the Universe stuff, and you know, and like a special packaging, and they'll have signed cards, and you know, and you know, make a bit of a deal about them and make them a bit special. But they'll all be handmade and hand painted, and you know, well, I mean, they come off a resin printer, but then they're hand painted by. But yeah, so that's been an adventure on its own, just making these action figures over the last few years.
I really like the entrepreneurial spirit going along with the films. Like that's I think that's for independent filmmakers, like especially self-producing stuff, like that's the future. Like you can't just
absolutely
make a go on just the exhibition of the movies anymore. Like you have to have alternate avenues. It's stuff that I'm looking into more now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, man, it was really good talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll see you again very soon. Let me know if you folks are liking these longer interviews. I've considered breaking them into shorter clips based on topics, but let me know what you like better. You like the complete interviews, or would you rather see several shorter interviews? Let me know in the comments. But whatever you do, keep making movies.